The DIESOL podcast,
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
episode 85, Skipping the Summer Slide.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 85. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Ixchell Reyes. Ni hao, ni hao, ni hao.
Ni hao, Zaijian. So you're out.
Hi. I'm back.
You're back, right?
I'm back from Taiwan. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, lots of so both of us have had a wild several weeks here, and we missed the last episode, which we missed like one or two over the years, I think, but not a lot. But this one we did miss. You were kind of in the process of wrapping up and moving back.
Mm-hmm.
I told you I posted this. My father passed away, which is, of course that's going to take up a massive amount of time and everything, and so that's been a little difficult. But also my semester ended, and I am doing the opposite of you, Ixchell, finally, which is I am packing up to move. And where you were in Japan before, now I will be in Japan sometime during the summer. I'm not sure between which episodes I'll actually end up landing there, but
that is so cool. It's finally here.
Yeah. So my sabbatical project is starting, or will be starting underway, and I am moving to Japan to do all that for 1 year. So it should be pretty exciting. And if anyone listeners out there are in Japan and want to do a meetup or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. I would be super stoked. I'll be in the Kansai area. So how are you liking back in Texas?
Well, it's actually cold compared to Taiwan, where San Antonio is actually usually pretty warm and humid, but we've been getting lots of rain, which is needed. I do like that I don't have to drive very far to work. But I do miss my colleagues. I met a lot of really cool people there.
Yes, the 10-minute commute is significantly better than the 2-hour commute, I'm assuming.
Significantly better.
Well, welcome back. So today, Ixchell, we're talking about summer and the summer slide and all of that. So let's just
dive right in, jump right in, slide right in.
Shut your mouth.
All right. So school is out for the summer. I think I saw posts of people graduating and their flight tickets back home. A lot of the students are going to be returning to visit their families, and inevitably they're not going to be using as much English just because they're going to be in a non-English speaking country. And a lot of the time students will worry about how their skills will survive the summer, I guess.
Yeah.
They worry that they're going to decrease. So we thought that it would be a good idea to talk about how come up with different ideas that where students can still practice independently for the summer.
Yeah, so you might want to kind of, as you're listening, you might want to gather some of these and send them off to your students. If you haven't gotten out of classes yet, you can send them along. If you have, you could maybe do this as part of like a wrap up email for your students. Whatever is going on. But for sure, students do worry about this, and it's we titled it under skipping the summer slide. And to be clear, Ixchell, I know we have some academics that listen, and the summer slide is a contentious idea, right? So some people are like, well, hold on a second, that's not, there's issues with the idea. Do we have actual learning loss during the summer or not? It still needs to be studied more. And so, but regardless, on a personal level, I've certainly felt that. Like, I haven't studied this for a couple of months, and
use it or lose it.
Yeah, use it or lose it. So I think we're just going to kind of keep with the the academics can keep on coming, but the common sense and personal experience is, I guess, where we're talking about it for today. So, and Ixchell, did you feel this, in your language learning? Did you feel like, hey, the couple months off or couple whatever, like I lost a lot, or what have you done?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think in general with Japanese, for example, when I was studying Japanese, there were times when I would be in Japan, but I'd be listening to people and I never really spoke. So I was still surrounded by Japanese. But then I realized later on when I tried to communicate in Japanese, the words weren't coming. I could understand, but the words were not coming. And we know that expressing yourself can be difficult to do if you're waiting for 10 seconds for the word to come, to register from your brain. So yes, absolutely. And it happens too in Spanish. Yeah. I don't speak Spanish all the time. And I do hear my mom speak Spanish and my sister speaks Spanish and friends speak Spanish. But if I don't use it, the word does not come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it becomes frustrating when you're trying. So then you revert to English or, whatever language you can express yourself best in. And so I think that's been my experience. And I'm guessing you use Japanese all the time.
I do, but it's limited, like it's at home Japanese, I guess, right, with my family, but it's, there's limitations on it. And I often catch myself going like, I know this word, but I can't say it or I can't find it or whatever it is. And that's part of the normal learning process and everything, but it's also very much a case where it's like, oh, I haven't used this word in a year. And so,
because the neural connection,
right.
The brain is trying to be efficient, so it's not going to retrieve it as fast.
Right.
So there you go for the academics out there.
So we're looking for a few ways to maybe help people, help the students keep going, help teachers encourage the students to kind of keep themselves up with things. Hopefully our ideas are not too high stress or demanding. I think different students are going to respond to these in different ways, but I'll say that we're kind of aiming this at the student who is asking, like, hey, what can I do during the summer? Like, we're not going to have classes, or how do I keep up? Because I do get those kind of ambitious students.
Yes.
Not every student will want to do other things, and I get that too, but I think that at least giving people some options for like, hey, here's a few ways that you can at least not let things slip too much if you're not totally actively building, although some of these ideas might also help students build as well. So I think we're talking really about like a lot of these ideas are kind of social options, or but some of them are also one-on-one or like study alone.
I think, Brent, that it's also important to remind students that the whole process of retaining language or practicing language should still have some element of fun and enjoyment, because I did have in Taiwan, I talked to some of my students, my higher level students, and I asked them, okay, so I introduced you to this Netflix series. How are you, and now you're interested in it. And then they came back and said, I watched it in Chinese first, and then I watched it in English, and now I'm watching it again for a third time, and I have all these notes. And I thought, but did you have fun? Because it's not meant to be a punishment. So there should be some kind of, I guess, the ideas that we're giving allow the student to choose how invested or how in depth to go with them. But it should still allow for some fun.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing is, like, if you're going to watch a show 3 times, and this is what I tell my students too, is like, great if you like that show and if you're wanting to watch it 3 times, or if it's because there are shows that we'll absolutely go back and revisit, right? Or movies that were like, hey, I can watch this thing 100 times because I like it so much. But if you're going for something that's brand new, you're taking a risk on like, hey, I'm going to be investing an hour and a half or 2 hours into watching this, and I know I'm going to be doing that again and again. Again, it's everyone's going to have their own
punishment or a burden.
Yeah, right. It's your choice. You're choosing the materials. You're choosing what's going on. So like, make it fun for yourself. I try to tell my students this so much, and so many times they have it like the learning process in their head is like it's a grind, right? And so you gotta memorize, gotta
watch again. If you're not in pain, it's not learning.
Yeah, so it's like, so we do have to work on shifting their perspective on what doing all of that stuff means as well. But yeah, okay, so we have a number of ideas, and again, total flexibility in how much you think students individually should be approaching these things. As teachers, you might want to go out there and explore these a little bit just before you say, hey, this is something that I want to work with. But let's get into the list a little bit. So I'm gonna jump us over. All right, Ixchell, you came up with the first idea. What is it?
Yeah. First idea is to have an English movie marathon, and that can be done with friends, or if you're actually, if you're still working. This happens, and this particularly, I'm thinking of the English teachers I met in Taiwan who will still be working and teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but they should have like a fun summer thing that they can do with colleagues. So, you could try the most recent films, or you could try some that you've already seen in your own language, so you're going to enjoy it, but now watch it in English. And it's a really good way to talk about, expose yourself to different genres, especially if you're watching with other people, because you'll be exposed to something that they like that you may not have particularly chosen.
Yeah, yeah, I like that idea. I like I like it. Kind of the old concept of I'm gonna bring something and you don't know what I'm gonna bring, and
Yeah.
then we're gonna watch it, and then we'll talk about it over snacks and drinks or whatever else it is
Yeah.
at the
And you
end.
can have themes. You could say, all right, bring your favorite movie for Valentine's Day or whatever it is, and then it could be something like completely not related, but still that person chose it, and it's still fun. It's fun.
Yeah. And again, like just thinking through this as possibilities, and it really depends on your personality type if you're into this, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also thinking like some people when they do these types of events, they like to present a little bit. So like you could do it if you wanted to. You could say, "Hey, after the movie, I'm going to be the one to lead a little bit of a discussion on it, or I'm going to ask some questions about it, or whatever else it is." So those might just be some light ways for the learner to kind of go through and say like, "Hey, here are some things that I learned from this," and you can again. I want to be very careful about how I present this, but you can go very deep into like, hey, let's practice this and study with it, or you can go very, very light and just say, hey, let's just have some fun and hang out together and practice a little bit of English, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine also some people going like, hey, here's some examples of some vocabulary words that we could use to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this movie, and let's do some vocabulary talking through it, or it could just be like, did you like it? What was your favorite part? A few really simple things. And so
Mm-hmm.
so again, it's that giving the control back to the student, or giving the learner the opportunity to choose how they want to move with it, can be tons of fun for them. And again, summer and movies are like a great combination, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
heat, get a cold drink, hang out with your friends, right? All of that stuff. So I love it. Okay, so I've got a next one here. I am going to we're going to jump around on this list a little bit here, Shell, if you're okay with
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yep.
let's keep talking about the movie part a little bit. I found this plugin, I guess, for Google Chrome, which is called Language Reactor. Have you heard of this?
No, I
Okay,
have not. That's new to me.
so this thing is wild. It's a pretty. Let me share screen with you while I talk about it. I know everybody listening will not be able to see what I'm talking about, but just to give a little bit of a sense of what we're looking at here is this is it basically you choose a language that you're trying to learn inside of there. So it could be English, right? And you choose your native language, and you choose whatever other language you're interested in learning, and then you go in and you can watch like Netflix or YouTube, or actually a bunch of different other things. But basically it's got a lot of different parts to it, but it will pull up the transcript as the movie's going, and so it'll highlight the transcript or the text as the movie is happening, and then it will also give you the direct translation, so the word for word translation, as well as kind of the natural language translation and how people would say it in the other language. So if the students are studying English, let's say they're watching a movie in a different language, they could be studying English, or you could be studying whatever language, but it'll give you different versions of those. And then you can also click on individual words and get like the vocabulary dictionary, and you can save those words into it. And so it's really actually a quite in-depth tool here, and I think it's totally free. I'm just kind of learning about it a little bit here, but it's actually pretty. If you wanted to get into it, you can plug it in. You can watch YouTube. You can watch Netflix. You can take out all the data, so you can actually strip out everything and put it into like a spreadsheet if you're into like getting that kind of nerdy with things. And so Yeah, so it's called Language Reactor, and it's a really interesting tool that I want to explore a little bit more and see how it can work for students. But
That
very,
is
you have the
pretty
opportunity to
cool.
either be kind of passive or pretty
Yeah,
proactive in your learning as you're watching things that you're interested in.
cool. That is cool.
Yeah,
Can't wait to try it out too.
yeah, it's worth. It's
Um,
really. I'm
mhm.
actually like I'm going to be
Yeah,
plugging it in with Japanese as as
yeah,
I go over the
yeah,
next year
yeah,
to
yeah.
refresh myself too.
Cool. So the next activity that I think would be fun to do is like the regular journal, but the summer journal, but doing it in English. And I have a couple of students who do this and throughout the year. They do English photo journals, but they do it on Instagram. So every weekend they post something like if they're cooking, they'll explain it in like 2 minutes or so. And so it'd be kind of cool to have something that students are publishing online, or if it could be a physical journal
Mm.
and about summer adventure. So it doesn't have to be shared. It could be something that they're doing just personally, privately. And if they don't know what to write about, they can always ask ChatGPT for a daily prompt.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add in there too. I think just as a piece of advice for some students, I think some students are hesitant to start doing too much English
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is on their social media because they
Mm-hmm.
don't, maybe they're a
They're
little
afraid.
embarrassed
Yeah.
or they're nervous that someone's going to come and complain about their language or whatever else it is, right? And so one thing that I was thinking with any of these is you can always just make a separate account, right? Like it's, hey, this is
Mm-hmm.
my hidden Instagram account, or it doesn't even have to be hidden, but you can actually just
It's called a
title it.
Finsta.
Yeah, well, entitle it in a way that shows, hey, I'm using this to study English, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
could be something like, you know, um, Brent studies English, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like
Way to stay anonymous.
yeah, I mean, you can keep it pretty well. You can tell people what you're doing with it too, right?
Right.
So that they recognize that when they see it, they're like, oh, okay, hold on a second. The reason that you're posting this way is because, maybe not all the English language is perfect, and then
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more obvious to people what they're looking at, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage people. Yeah, you can be anonymous, of course, but you can also straight up tell people the purpose of this is for me to study English, and therefore like that can put down some of the burden on you to be perfect, to say like, hey, imperfect but practicing, right? So
Yeah.
so I would encourage that too, because I know a lot of my students have multiple Instagram accounts. They have their what are these all called, the Friendstagrams and
Finsta. Finsta.
Finsta, yeah, and etc. So all of those things are ways that you can just tie it right back into your language learning as well. Um,
Cool.
oh yeah, you kind of have a second part to this, right?
Yeah, I was going to say for those students who want to take the risk, or practice and take the risk and actually commit to 1 minute English videos explaining or sharing something. I think that really helps. And I watched a lot of short 1 minute Instagram stories where someone is teaching something really simple in Chinese, for example, or Japanese. But they're very, very short. And it could be something like repeating how to say hello three
Mm-hmm.
times in both languages. And that's something it's a small risk and it's pretty easy. And again, it helps to lower the affective filter, and it helps you to build confidence. And then those are actually really useful for people who are learning, who are emerging learners.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And remember, like total beginner level all the way up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
when you're teaching, you're learning, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
so if you're just telling people, hey, this is how I say hello, right? And this is this is how I adjust my pronunciation or whatever else it is, it can be really beneficial. And again, I want to just like the social media side of things. It doesn't matter how many likes you get on any of these things, right? It doesn't matter.
You can turn that off.
Yeah, you can turn it all off and
Right off.
just
Mm-hmm.
focus on the work. Yeah. So I'm going to connect to a longer version of that. So that's like the kind of 1 minute getting started with things.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that some students are really interested in more in-depth work. And so as they're becoming more advanced, then they might be interested in starting a podcast or a YouTube channel or something like that, where they go into deeper explanations of things. And also, I'm just going to encourage that it doesn't have to be language stuff, right? It could be, it could just be whatever you're interested in doing. So, I have a student who, plays or is learning to play the ukulele, right? And so they made videos, and then they started saying, hey, here's how I'm playing this. These are the chords that I learned this week. And then they just show a little bit of that. And, but being able to talk about those things in English was their goal. So like learning to say things like, I'm playing this chord, or, I'm here I'm holding the neck. And the reason I like this song is because it makes me feel happy, whatever else it is, right? And so they can go into longer things. If it's a YouTube video, it's videos like teaching how to do things. If it's a podcast, it might be stories about certain things. We've talked so much about like what people can do with podcasts in the past, but again, same type of thing is I have students that I introduced podcasting to several years ago, and they still do it like, hey, once a week, once a month. I just kind of am recording and putting something up there, and my family can listen to it back home, or my, whatever, or I can share it out with people as I'm kind of going, but really it's more for me and not for anybody else. And that's really the approach I'm talking about here.
Very, very cool. The other thing that students can do is to join or start an English challenge on social media or with friends. And we found a cool website called the 30-Day English Challenge. Someone has already created a 30-day template for different activities. So of course that can be customizable if you can't do 30 days. But again, it has some pretty cool ideas like finding a joke in English, listening to a TED Talk about language, taking an online personality quiz, listening to favorite songs, reading horoscope in English. So a lot of those are fun, and they're all varied activities. They're all very doable. They don't take very long. So I think that it would be kind of cool to have, students in your class to see how many of those activities you could complete over the course of the summer if you wanted to, and then compare like who completed the most, or which one was the hardest, or, talk about that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, I also like the idea of possibly if you turn that in, because for some people, like doing it as like a little bet or a challenge amongst each other, right? So, hey, the person who gets the most done gets a free meal treated by the other people who don't, who didn't get as much or whatever. So you're going to take me out to sushi or, whatever else it is. And so I could see, for sure, there could be some options playing around with that. A lot of fun. I'm also going to add in here, so board games. We, if you remember, way back in episode 33, we did an interview with Dustin Stats, and it was board gaming with education. And so I'm not totally sure. It seems like he's gone through a couple of little changes, but I think he has a store now in Los Angeles called BGE Tabletop. And so we'll have links to that in the show notes with the updates. But he's still selling board games, and he still has a focus on education and people learning things and understanding all of those things. So, BGE Tabletop might be a good place to start looking, or just, again, it's just playing games. So, Ixchell, I'm not sure if I told you this, this semester, me and one of my colleagues, Kalisha Galvin, we started doing a board games on our campus with our students. So every other week we would have some students come together. It was just an open activity, and we could play some board games, and it was great. Like, it was card games, board games, all of these, tabletop games, right? And it was a slow start, and people started coming more and more, but we're going to keep on building it. And so we had, up to 10 or 12 students just showing up and playing games for an hour. And then the students, a lot of the times they'd be like, oh, this is really great. I want to take this back to my family or back to my kids. And that was really the goal, right? Is like, is that, hey, then you can take it back and you can play it with your friends. You can play it with other people, and you can make adjustments to the game with how much English you need or have. But then again, because you're thinking about the game and not so much about the English. And you might have we put up a couple of structural guides like, hey, here are some sentence stems that you can use or whatever. But really, they're not heavily like thinking that they're studying English. They're thinking, hey, I'm playing a game here and I'm using a little bit of English to get it going. But low stress, high impact, opportunity for use of whatever it is that you're trying to say. And so more board games. And I mean, what a great thing to do during the summer anyways, right?
Games. I'm all about games, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. So lots of fun opportunities with that. Oh, and by the way, if you're listening out there and you have recommendations for games that students would like, please send them to us, because I'm always keeping an eye out for more. And now that we have this little club, I have a little bit of funding to be able to buy these things and test them out too. So
so jealous.
Yeah, it's
cool.
Kind of sweet.
All right. So another thing students can do is to start an English book club. And I think of this as an activity that students can do with like 2 or 3 people, so that it's still kind of I mean, sure, you can do it with large groups or even strangers online. But if you're going back home and you have a friend who's also from the same country in another town, and you both commit to reading the same book, now you have some way to keep in touch while you're over, back home. And of course, you can always discuss. I know a lot of the students meet up when they go back to their countries, and they'll have lunch or something together because they've now become friends. But that's another way to kind of a stress-free way to continue with language. And I think it's even better if there's a film, because you can watch the film afterward, and it just sort of, you can compare and contrast or just enjoy it. But, that's another way to promote reading and to have people engage and again, if they want to get really deep, there are other ways to make that quite to extend the activity, to actually go online and talk to other people maybe back home who are reading it.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of ending it with the movie too, because that also ties back to your first one, which is doing the movie club, right? Because you could also say like, hey, if you read the book, great, you can get some value out of it that way. If you didn't read it, just come and join us for the movie. So you could actually, like the people who are more hardcore, it's like, hey, we can read this book, and then we know that at the end of a month we're going to watch the movie. Or the people who are just into watching the movie could only show up less often too, right? So there's lots of cool ways to potentially play with that.
And what I like when that happens is when students have read a famous line, but they've read it in the book, and then they see it performed by an actor or actress in a movie, and then it's different, and then they start using that line or that quote or something like that. So that's
when it finally locks in.
Like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So now all my students are running around saying, to be or not to be.
Well, no, it's interesting because a little bit of a side note, I had the students analyze the words we were talking about Americana music back in Taiwan. And so 2 songs were the Beach Boys, Kokomo, and also Harry Nilsson's Spaceman. Is it Spaceman? Is it called Spaceman? Oh my gosh, I can't remember right now. But both of those are on the soundtrack to Space Force, the series on Netflix. Okay. And we had read the lyrics, and we had listened to the song, but then they heard them playing in the background of an episode.
I love that. That's super smart.
Yes, and they all just were so into it, and even though they just play that little tiny clip of the song, it's like it was a whole different thing. And I told them, sometimes it's better to listen to the soundtrack of a movie first, see what the songs are, and then it just connects differently when you're watching, and then you can talk about why they chose that song, because it's not by chance that they chose the Beach Boys, Kokomo, and Harry Nilsson, or is it Man on the Moon? Spaceman? I can't remember.
I'm not sure, but I love that. And I mean, and this is kind of moving off topic for the day, but that's a great way also for teachers to plan for future lessons, right? Is like, hey, if we're going to show this show, what is that background music? What are those songs being played? And then without even telling the students, you could play that and do a little mini lesson on that beforehand. So then when it comes up in the show that you're watching or whatever, then
Oh, the ears per cup.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Cool. I love all of that. So that's great. I have a tiny tag on to that. So you said English book club or whatever. I think we will continue mentioning this for years and for however long it exists, which is just finding a meetup. Because if you go to meetup.com, I always assume that everybody knows this, but it is a website where you find people with similar interests who kind of live around you, and then you get together and you do that thing. And so if you're into book clubs, there are tons of those. There are game clubs, there are movie clubs, there are photography clubs, there are hiking clubs, there's whatever, right? And so so if you find people who have that same interest, meetup.com, meetup.com, and you can just find things that you're interested in doing and different groups of people who are passionate about that same topic. And so it's a great way to connect with other people who want to talk about the same things you do.
And Brent, I wanted to mention that Meetup is also available overseas. So if students want to hang out with other English speakers who are living overseas during the summer, I ran into a lot of my students in Taiwan wanting to, they didn't know about Meetup. And sure enough, we use the app because there's an app, and you could find language exchange groups, especially with university students. So that's another way to continue that overseas if they're overseas for the summer, and to continue here in the States if they're staying here for the summer.
Great. I love that. Yeah. So for sure, Meetup, the oldie but goodie, but not everybody knows about it.
Not still. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. And the last one for me here is, I just think the more and more of these things. So, the AI conversation of course is, there's so much more to continue talking about, and we're not trying to turn the show into an AI show, but, it will come up more and more.
There's a sister site for that.
Yeah, there's a sister site. AI and ESL.com. So if you're interested, you can go over and take a look at it, because I've been posting a little bit there, trying to get some ideas, but I've also been slowing down, just like the show slowed down a little bit.
It's okay.
That's okay. But I did find this one app, and they reached out to me, and I talked to them about it, and I introduced it a tiny bit into my class, which is this app called Flow, and the website is flowspeak, flowspeak.io. And basically what it does is it lets students log into it, and they do a tiny bit of speaking practice into the AI app. And so what it does is it recognizes, hey, how smoothly are you speaking? How accurate are your words? It'll give you like a little phrase, and it'll ask you to repeat after it, and then tell you how your pronunciation is. And then now they're tying in more AI stuff so that you can kind of go in your own direction with the conversation and have it maybe respond to you. They're still building that out a little bit, I think, but I think that more and more of these apps, and I mean, these things are just all coming out so fast. So this is just an example of a way, hey, maybe I don't have a specific person that I can talk to today, right? I can't do my meetup every single day with all sorts of people. I don't have that kind of time, but you could still practice speaking with an app like this, like Flow, in order to just kind of get your little bit of daily practice and getting words out, and not just doing the listening like you were talking about, but also producing. And so this, we'll link to this one in the show notes. I'm sure there are other ones out there that are starting to come up and show up, but speaking apps, I think, are going to be a big thing for people coming up.
Very cool. All right, it is time for our fun finds. Today I have Awas tea, which is tea from Taiwan, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but it's AWAS. You can find it in the States, but it's really, really good. I think one of the things I acquired while I was there was a taste for tea, and particularly cold teas, iced teas. And of course, you have a lot of milk teas with boba, but I actually found myself craving the cold milk teas, and they're pretty expensive here. I mean, it's about $7 a cup if you go, to a boba tea shop. But you could just brew your own and make it like the Taiwanese do it at home. And this is a brand that I tried and had a lot of really cool flavors. So Awas tea from Taiwan.
Nice. Okay. So mine is the new Arnold Schwarzenegger TV show on Netflix called Fubar. Have you heard about this one?
No.
So it's very much in the spirit of True Lies. So for those of you who
Well,
watched
that's why he must have been trending recently.
oh, it's for sure. It's about this.
Yeah.
So people love it. I'll say, like, I've really been enjoying it. It's definitely a lot of forced scenes. Like, it's like, oh, that's very convenient for this thing to happen to be the CIA, you know, for the next thing to happen. So it's all just like very set up, you know. I mean, it's a written movie, but it's like sometimes it just feels like, okay, there's too much serendipity for these events to happen. But it's in that silliness realm that True Lies kind of lies in, where it's like half real, half silly and totally unbelievable, and not to the point where people can fly themselves, but it's like that kind of semi-surreal state of like, this is comedy, this is drama, this is action, this is all sorts of things. It's also got some really violent action. So it's this weird combination.
As an Arnold film,
of course, yeah, exactly. So it's like you're watching an Arnold Schwarzenegger show, right? But it's fun, and you know, there's just a lot of good throwbacks if you like the old Arnold. Like, there's all these little Easter eggs hidden in there, you know, from lots of different movies inside of there, including I haven't watched it. We didn't do a binge watch. We're kind of watching it one night at a time, or every other night, or whatever it is, and I found there was a great twins a twins reference in there too. And so they've got all these super fun things. But anyways, Fubar is you know, if you want to just kind of have turn your brain off, have a little bit of fun, watch some action, watch some adventure. It has been a great show, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who just wants to enjoy their summer a bit.
All right. If you are giving us a shout out anyway, be sure to tag us on social media. We're mostly on everything. Kind of. Mainly on Twitter.
Kind of. Yeah, we're still complaining about the state of social media in these days. So we're around, but what are we going to do about this, Ixchell? Just a quick second here. Like,
I don't know. I've thought about it. Like, what if Twitter goes down the drain in the next few months and it doesn't recover? I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, but we're on the other platforms. It's not going to be TikTok because that's a risky platform. Maybe Instagram.
I think the problem is that people aren't unified in where they're trying to move to, right? And so it's like people. So like, that's fine. Maybe it's fine. Like, hey, we're scattered across other things, but also I don't have the capacity to check all the different sites all the time, you know. So I guess we'll keep seeing what happens. I am still on Twitter, but it's definitely a much less enjoyable experience than it used to be. So anyways, there we go. You can still shout out to us. We would still love to hear from you. Oh, and by the way, you can come straight to the website at diesel.org and you can find us there and leave notes and messages for us there as well. In fact, this episode is at diesel.org/85, and you can listen to us at Voice Ed Canada. That's voiced.ca. For Twitter, you can find the show at DieselPod, and you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
You can still sort of find me at Ixie_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
That's right. And in honor of Arnie, in Austrian German, thank you is vielen Dank. So, vielen Dank for tuning in to the Diesel Podcast.
Vielen Dank.
Yeah, that's a terrible pronunciation.
Sorry.
No, me. Vielen Dank. No, it's not good either.